Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Love Chat with the Love Twins. I'm Michelle, and I'm so happy to have you here with me today as we are live with a new Love Chat. Now, before we dive in, do us a favor, and some of you have already started. Say hi in the comments so that we know that you're here, so I know I'm not alone. And if you're watching the replay, you can go ahead and type replay so we can love on you too. All right? Okay, awesome. Hello. Now, tonight's topic is one we've seen touch even the most emotionally intelligent, high achieving women. And so it's subtle and sneaky. So we wanted to bring it out of the shadows and shine some light on it for you. So it's really one of the biggest reasons why love starts to feel hard and heavy. So, and I want to say this up front, everything we're talking about tonight on tonight's Love Chat applies whether you're in a relationship or you're dating. And I'm going to bring in some of those connections for you. Let me just move this like this. Okay, here we go. All right. Now, here's why I'm doing that, because some of the things that quickly can drain love in a relationship or over time can drain love in a relationship usually start forming or start showing up right away in the few weeks when you're dating, in the very beginning of that connection period. And so the thing that happens though, and we've seen this over and over again, is most women don't realize it's there because they don't know what to look for. They don't know how to recognize it. So we want to make sure that you know how to do that if you're dating, and if you're in a relationship, whether you've been in a relationship for a while or you've just started, you're going to find tonight's Love Chat very, very, very valuable for you. All right, especially if what you're looking for is lifelong love. So tonight we're talking about how love loses its direction and how it does that in a very quiet way. So I want to start right away by saying this. If anything in your love life, current or past, has felt off, maybe it's not necessarily bad or toxic. We talked about some of those things last week. This is another level of this, okay? Maybe it's not toxic, it's not explosive, it's just misaligned. It's misaligned with what you really want to experience. If you've ever felt that, then tonight's Love Chat is the right place to be for you. So, like I said, I'll be incorporating some of the ways that this shows up in the dating life as well, okay? And what you can do to recognize it. So, here's something that is important to know. You may have experienced it. Love doesn't usually lose its direction in an obvious way. So it doesn't happen because of a big blow up, and it doesn't always happen because of a betrayal. It's not always a dramatic moment that you can put your finger on, point it out, and say, that's when everything changed. That's when things started to unravel. That's not the way that it happens. Most of the time, it starts with a drift. So there's still love there. There's even the experience of being connected, but the relationship starts running on a routine instead of being intentional. And then little by little, what starts to happen is what used to feel like love was present and it was guiding you and you could feel it and experience it. It starts to feel like love is something you have to manage to keep it alive. So what do I mean by love having a direction? So first, direction in love is not about controlling. It's not about control. And it's also not about pressure. It's not about forcing some kind of deadline or timeline. And that's important to say because this is what we hear a lot from women, especially women who are, highly motivated, highly driven. We're used to going towards the goal, achieving the goal, checking it off. That's not the way that it works in love. And when you are trying to be controlling or putting pressure or forcing deadlines, that is considered an ultimatum, and that is going to have somebody, especially a high quality man, push away. So what I mean by direction is simply this, is there's a shared understanding of where the relationship is going. You both are clear on that without having to say, where's this relationship going? We really recommend that you not have that conversation because that could occur as pressure. So there's a shared understanding that the relationship is moving in a direction that you're both comfortable, aware of, aligned with, and you're both very clear about what you're building together. Even at the very beginning, you know what you want. I remember the exact day that Arnie and I we became an official couple. I was very sick, I remember, and he was sick too. And so we sat in a restaurant, had chicken soup, and we had the conversation. And if you know my story with Arnie, you know that we had dated and then we didn't, and then we dated and then we didn't. And it got to the point that I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I know what I want. And I'm not going to be with someone who doesn't know what they want. Not like in a mean way. I just said, I love you. I love me more, is basically what that initial conversation sounded like. And it was the first time I had ever actually said that. And I was in my mid-30s at that point. And it was the first time that somebody wasn't sure about whether or not they wanted to be in a relationship or they wanted to be committed. And I didn't go into trying to convince them why they should feel differently. I didn't go into trying to convince them into, and about how great I was. It was like, I know what I want. You don't want that. I'm moving on because I will have what I want. I knew it in my heart that I was going to have it. Like I knew my name was Michelle. And so when we did come back together 5 months later, he called and he knew I was dating somebody else. And he said, and it wasn't a committed relationship. It was exclusive. It wasn't committed. In other words, we were dating only each other, but there was no commitment for a future. It was very new in what we were experiencing. And he asked me to give him another chance. And I thought about it. And so to have the conversation over chicken soup, that's where I'm bringing you, right? That's where we were. And we had the conversation and we both were so happy that we're in alignment. And one of the things that we talked about was that we wanted the relationship from the very beginning, from that first conversation. We started sharing about what we wanted to experience. And both of us agreed we wanted to experience a lot of fun and laughter. We wanted to experience respect. We talked about what we didn't want. We talked about we didn't want any yelling or name calling or cursing at each other, around each other, anything like that. And that holds true till today. I'm not saying I've never raised my voice or he never raised his voice. I'm saying that somebody in that conversation will say, that's loud, or I don't want to be yelled at, or I'd like the tone to come down. Somebody says that on either side, and immediately the other person responds. That is the agreement. All right. So just to give you an example of what that can look like from the very beginning. So in that direction, you both know where you're headed. You both want the same things, and you're building that together. So it has emotional agreements too, kind of like what I was just talking about. This is what we're creating. This is what I'm available for. This is what he's available for. This is what matters to me. This is what matters to him. This is what matters to us as a couple. How are we going to navigate hard moments? From way before Arnie and I got married, we knew who was going to, if there was a decision that we were at an impasse, we both agreed he would make the final decision. And the only reason I agreed to that is not because I couldn't make the final decision. It's because I trust the man I'm with. And I know he has our best interest in mind. Way from the beginning, we knew that we were going to celebrate some holidays with his family, some holidays with my family. Sometimes we do both at one shot. I mean, all of these conversations were happening. So that's what I mean by direction. It's moving, it's flowing. And both people know the kind of partnership that they want together. And it's built intentionally and on purpose. So when that's missing, or it starts to drift out of that, whether maybe it's never been there, maybe it has, and then you started drifting out of that, then what starts to happen is things don't explode, they just get blurry. How many of you have ever experienced that, where you've been in a relationship and nothing really bad has happened, but you're starting to notice that something is shifting, something is changing? Not only because people immediately say, oh, he's pulling away. No, you are having the experience. You feel something is not the way that it was. I don't feel in this relationship the way that I felt before, whether that's emotionally safe, whether that's confident in what's going on, whether that means you're hurt or not. If you've ever felt that, go ahead and tell me in the chat. Yeah, Adrian says, hey, Adrian. Adrienne says, yes, she has felt that. So I want to tell you a little truth about this, okay? Love rarely loses direction all at once. Rarely does that happen. It loses direction quietly when the connection is allowed to run on routine instead of intention. Intention means you're present to it, you're conscious of it, you're actively creating what you're creating together. So, because routine and familiarity can feel like connection, and this is so important because a lot of couples think that because they're sitting in the living room watching the same program, they're connecting. No, you're not. That is not a connection point. A connection point is when you're having a conversation, where you're having a shared experience together, and there's not something that could take your attention away from the person. Like you could be traveling, or you could be on a walk with someone, and that connection point is the conversation that you're having, not just that you're doing the same thing. Does that make sense? So routine can become very familiar, so it can feel like connection. So, you're still texting, you're still seeing each other, you're still having some great trips together and great moments, a great dinner together. You might still be having intimate moments, physically intimate moments together. You might still call each other babe or hun or whatever it is that your sweet term of endearment is for one another. So what happens is, from being an intentional creation, it becomes to a series of moments that are happening. And that's when love starts to feel like, what's going on here? Like, what are we doing here? That might be a question you might ask yourself. You might ask yourself, where is this going? Like, I just feel like we're not headed anywhere. Or you might even say to yourself, why do I feel so unsettled, even though there's nothing technically wrong? Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in a situation where everything looks fine on paper, but inside, like anybody who's looking at you, or let's just say on the screen, everything looks fine, but if somebody were to look inside, they would know that you're just coasting, kind of just like floating, drifting off? If you've ever had that experience where on the outside everything looks like everything's great, I'm doing this, I'm going for it, but on the inside you're really coasting, just type C in the chat so I know that you resonate with what I'm saying here. And what happens is, when that happens in relationships, when that coasting, that drifting happens, it's because a shared vision is no longer there. A shared vision is no longer there. So it doesn't fall apart. Love doesn't fall apart. It just becomes unclear and it feels unsettled. And when it becomes unclear, and the woman is wired for responsibility, wired for being in control, managing things, what starts to happen is that she becomes the one that's trying to get the clarity or create the clarity, which leads me to my next point. And here's the second truth. If love has no clear direction, if there's no intention or direction in a relationship, then emotional responsibility is often taken on by the woman, whether she's aware of it or not. Now, some of you are going to start really feeling like dings inside or your head or your heart or your body, because you're so programmed to do this that you may not even be aware of it. So this is where a lot of our ladies get caught, because not only are it's not because you're trying to control or you want to control. So this is important to get, because a lot of times when we're telling Michelle, I'm not trying to be controlling. No, you're probably not trying to be controlling, and it's controlling. So it's not because you are trying to control or you're wanting to control things. And it's also not because you're too much of something or because you're doing something wrong. It's none of that. And that's usually where our brain goes. What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? Maybe I need to do this, more of this, less of this. It's not that. It's because the direction was either never, this is why I said you may have never had it, never concisely shared, because you were just wrapped up in all the chemistry and all the hormones and all the, infatuation that happens at the beginning. And you never had that conversation. I am telling you that I've had coaching sessions with people who've been married 10, 15, 20 years, and they don't know what the vision of the relationship is. They might know they want to buy a house. I'm talking about the vision of the relationship. Like, what do you want to experience and how do you want this to grow? So either the conversation never happened where it was consciously created, shared, and communicated, or the couple took their eyes off the vision and the direction and they got distracted. So what happens is, if you are like many of the women who we attract into our community, you're a high achieving, driven woman, you know how to get things done, you are going to start being the one who's initiating conversations. You'll become the one who's trying to guide the relationship, get it back on track. You're the one that's going to be trying to get this future that you have in mind to happen outside of your mind and with your partner. And you become the one that starts to carry all the emotional mapping, trying to move things in a certain direction on a certain path when they're not moving there naturally. And that's what starts to feel uncomfortable, not just for you, but for your partner. So what this can sound like in speaking is, are we okay? If you're asking, are we okay? And you're asking that more than once, something inside of you is telling you there's something that's not aligned here. There's something off track. Or I feel like, we don't want the same things. Or what are we anymore? And then if you're honest with yourself, sometimes that experience and speaking that way starts to feel like you're in a relationship with a man, but you're also feeling like, yes, you're in a relationship with a man, but you're managing the relationship. You're managing the whole thing. It becomes like another experience of something to do, like a job. And in relationships, this looks like you're the one that's holding the emotional center, right? But in dating, so that you start to notice this in the beginning, it shows up like being the one who's always following up. The one who, when, there's a disagreement, you're always the one who's trying to smooth things out. Or you're the one that's trying to keep the conversations alive. Or you're the one that is quiet and you make it comfortable by saying something, instead of allowing him to step up, step in, and also co-create with you. So it's subtle. And here's the thing. This is, again, I'm talking at what it feels like in the beginning. And even in the relationship, it feels like you're being kind. It feels like you're being the mature one. It feels like, and this is a big one, and I'm not saying these are not things to be. I'm going to clarify after I say it. It feels like you're being inspiring to him, or you're the one that's being caring. But what's happening is you're bringing so much to fill in a gap that's not there. Gap of something that's not coming from the other side. And it starts to feel, after a while, like you are not just carrying the emotional center, you're carrying him too. How many of you know what I'm talking about? If you know what I'm talking about, type yes in the chat. Type yes in the chat. Now, let's talk about what this can look like. Keep making it more real and less theoretical, right? Because some of this can happen so unconsciously that you may have done it so many times that you may not know what this looks like in real life. So some of the things you might hear yourself saying is you're bringing up this, like, what's the state of us conversations, or you're rushing to make emotional repairs, or you're noticing that there's distance, and the more distance you feel, the more you work at trying to close that distance. Or you're the one that's doing all the internal work and there's no conversation about how two people can come together and create this vision. So this is the wild part. While you really can do all of this and still be a loving woman, it creates imbalance. Like we were talking about last week, it creates that lack of harmony. And what starts to happen is the relationship becomes lopsided. The relationship becomes lopsided. And when it's lopsided, it's because love was never meant to be carried by one person and one person alone. In a relationship, there are two people there. So here's a powerful check-in question. Where are you carrying what should be shared or what isn't even yours to carry? And ask that again. Where are you carrying what should be shared, or where are you carrying what isn't even yours to carry? Because sometimes you're taking on your thing and you're taking on his thing and it's not your thing. You know, I have somebody, one of our clients who's in a situation where there's somebody that she's dating and this person has an addiction. And Gladys and I are very, very straightforward with our clients. It's why they get such amazing results. The ones that listen, not because we know everything, but because we've been doing this for a long time successfully. And, you know, very straight conversation that sounded like, you will never love an addict enough to have them give up their addiction. That's not the way it works. You will never be something enough, not something enough, more of something, less of something. You can't do more or do less to have somebody else make that choice. And when you try to carry that, you're carrying something that doesn't belong to you. And then you're carrying that part of the relationship by yourself. And when it comes to addiction, I'm not going to get into the whole thing of addiction. When it comes to addiction, you'll never be first, because the addiction will always be first. So things get lopsided. One person's carrying everything and you weren't meant to carry it alone. So if that question, what are you carrying? You know, where are you carrying something that should be shared or carrying something that isn't yours to carry? Just type L for lopsided in the chat. Just, you get that, you've been there, you've done that, and you're just acknowledging it. We're not here to judge anything or shame anybody. It's just important to acknowledge these things, because you can't transform anything that you're not at least willing to look at and acknowledge and take responsibility for. Transformation starts with acknowledgement and insight, awareness, and then it's about taking responsibility for what's happened and what's going to happen. All right, so this is something I want you to hear very clearly. When you become the emotional manager of the attention and the caring and dating, or you become the emotional manager of the intention and love in a relationship, it will eventually start to feel like work. Even with a good man, even with a decent man, even with a man who really cares for you and loves you. Because emotional responsibility without a shared vision and direction creates silent pressure. And what pressure does is it kills the sense of emotional safety inside of you and inside of your partner. Pressure also kills desire. And I'm just talking about physical desire. I'm talking about the desire to be with somebody, to be in a conversation, to be in a room, to share an experience. And pressure also kills your ability to relax and love. And it starts to feel stressed and you start to feel tense about it. So I want to do a mini check-in with you right now. I want you to answer these questions. You can either answer them in the comments or privately to yourself. And you can answer them whether you're in a relationship or you just, you can think of the last 2 relationships or dating interactions you've been in. When you are dating or in a relationship, who initiates the difficult conversations? You can put me or him. Who initiates the difficult conversations? Whether you're dating or in a relationship, who manages the planning of the dates? When and where and how? Me or him? Who's the one that notices when something's off? Me or him? Who's the one that does the emotional repairing, which means the one that's trying to, let's say you have an argument or a conflict happens, and who's the one that's going to be the first one in there to try and solve things? Me or him? And then the last one is who's doing the most adjusting, the most flexing to keep the dating experience or the relationship stable and keep it going? Me or him? Thank you, ladies, for your honesty. I really appreciate that. So you're starting to see there's a lot of me, me, me. And this is why we're saying it can come so subtly. You may not even be conscious that it's happening. Now, I want to reiterate this because it's so important, because I know I'm talking to you, my loves, and I'm talking to the little voice inside your head. So we're not doing this exercise to blame men or make them wrong. We are so not about that. And we're also not about blaming you or making you wrong or shaming you. What we're doing here is we're creating clarity, because crystal clear clarity is where your power comes back. Especially, like I said, if you're willing to see something clearly and then say, okay, so I was a part of this. How do I transform it? So here's truth number 3. Love is not just going to naturally align itself all by itself. I've seen so many couples, we've coached so many couples, either Arnie and myself or Gladys and Arnie, or Gladys on her own, have coached couples who were waiting for it to sort itself out. And many times it's either too late, or they already have the divorce papers in hand, or somebody's living in a different location. And so much emotional damage has been done that without intervention, there's no turning it around. At least with effective intervention, there's a shot. So it's not going to just come together by itself. That doesn't happen. Arnie, years ago, when we first started dating, he said something one day that I was like, wow, that is so profound. We were talking about extraordinary relationships. And, I even had written a poem called Extraordinary, what would an extraordinary relationship look like? And that became my love vision. And actually, Imagine an Extraordinary Relationship, what it's called. And we were talking about it. We were talking about a couple that we knew, and they were really struggling. And talking about this, like they kind of drifted apart, and then neither one of them really knew what to do. And she kept trying, and he was like over it. And the more she tried, the more pressure he felt. And he actually was saying that. And in the conversation with the gentleman, he said, there's like, you don't have to do so much. It's just going to come together. Love just happens naturally. And Arnie said, well, love might, but relationships, extraordinary relationships, are created. They don't just happen. And that's always stayed with me. So without a clear love vision guiding what you are available for and what your partner is available for, if you're in a relationship, then the default is going to default to familiarity. And if you haven't had healthy relationships, healthy, mutually supportive, respectful, aligned, empowering relationships, what's familiar is probably not going to give you satisfaction. You might be used to it, but it's probably way off from what you really envision, what you want your love life to be. So without a clear vision where you know what you're available for, then the relationship is going to default to what's familiar. It's going to default to this lopsided imbalance, this lack of harmony, and it's going to default to effort. Even between two good people, even who are smart, who never intended to lose their way. And this is so very important because most relationships don't fail because the people don't care. The people in the relationship don't care. That's not why most relationships fail. It's because they drift and they lose the shared vision. So what are we coming back to? You don't have a vision. What are you coming back to? So then that's when the relationship defaults. And the default usually looks like what I was just pointing to before is what your nervous system already knows. The familiar dynamics that aren't always healthy, the familiar emotional agreements, which aren't always balanced, or they don't exist in a healthy way. The familiar roles, who's going to do more, who's going to do less, who's going to push for this, who's going to be the one that's always doubting and jealous. Like that's what it's going to default to. Or one person over functioning and one person leaning all the way back. Or familiar uncertainty and stress. And I've seen this a lot. And it even surprised me how often it happens when couples, and it doesn't make any sense, but just check in and see if this happens to you. There's some couples that what they're so familiar with because of their past and because of what they've created together is they create unnecessary conflict and drama big time. Because where they feel connected is in the making up. So in order to feel that connection subconsciously, they just keep creating these breakups and these breakdowns and these fights and arguments so they can feel connected when they come together. And it only lasts until they start to feel emotionally unsafe again. And then they got to create another conflict. This is why thinking and doing relationships with the logical mind doesn't work, because it's not logical. It's emotional and it's in your nervous system. So if you've experienced any of this, if you've ever heard yourself saying, you know, is this the way it's supposed to be? You're not crazy, okay? You're probably experiencing what we're saying, and it doesn't feel great when you're going through it. And if you've ever been through it, even if you're not going through it right now, didn't feel great then. And then that could create a fear, hesitation in moving forward. And it might, you know, hijack your consciousness. And now you're back in the same role again. So if you're sensing an absence of direction, you're going to feel emotionally unsettled in the relationship. All right. And most likely you're going to try to overwork it to get it back to where you want it or where you want it. But that's not really the path to extraordinary love. You're never going to feel secure, emotionally secure in a relationship where you feel like you have to work so hard and you're so afraid that it's going to fall apart and you don't even know where you're going. You just won't feel safe in that. So how do you then reorient back into this love vision, into love again? You're not going to do it by chasing. You're not going to do it by chasing, because that is going to feel like pressure. And high quality men in general do not want the woman to be the one chasing them. They want to feel it's part of their DNA to be the one who pursues. And when a woman does the pursuing, it actually turns them off and it has them pull further away. And I've actually heard men say, I felt suffocated. I feel like I can't even breathe because there's no space to miss her. So you're not going to do it by that. You're not going to do it by trying to force a commitment, giving ultimatums, putting pressure, timelines, and things like that. And you're not going to do it by carrying the whole thing by yourself, like we were talking about before. And in dating, you're not going to do it by trying to push for connection that's not there, or trying to manage how things unfold, rushing through the getting to know you part, trying to get some sense of, I used to do this all the time. I used to rush through the part of getting to know somebody to see if they're really a good match for me and what I wanted to experience. So I could feel like, okay, now I'm in a relationship. Now I can make it work. Now I'm going to do all these things. And I was not only putting pressure on myself, I was putting pressure on the guys. And I was dating guys that eventually I would see like, this is not what I want. This is so not what I want. Something in their character, their behavior, their patterns would show up, and it would be exactly the opposite of what I said I wanted. But I kept thinking I was going to be able to do it by what I was doing on my own rather than creating a shared vision. And finding out, is this person even interested in that vision too? So And here's a big, big one that I want you to remember. You're not going to create a connected mutual love vision by pre-investing yourself emotionally with someone who hasn't shown you who they are. It's a little version of what I just said. Like you just invest, and do, show up amazing. And this person hasn't even shown you who they are. Now you've wasted a lot of time and energy. You feel like you're being used when you're the one that was showing up that way, and it didn't end up the way you wanted to anyway. So remember, don't pre-invest. Allow for interest to meet interest. Allow for effort to be mutual, and allow for presence to be there for both people. That's how you get to know if this is a match for you. All right. So how you get reoriented is that you get crystal clear about what you want and what you're available for. You've got to start there, because if you don't know what you want and what you're available for, you're going to wait to see what he wants, and then you're going to fit you into his vision instead of creating a mutual, joint, partnered vision. And a love vision is not something that's on a vision board. I want to be very clear about this. And it's not about manifesting a man into reality. It's not a fantasy. It's none of that. What it really is, it's an internal compass that matches your deepest values and your deepest desires. It's a standard really that you live from in your life, and you bring that forward into your relationship. And it's the way that you choose relationships that match the woman that you are now. And this is why doing your internal heart work is so important, because if the woman that you are now is afraid that you're never going to have what you want, what do you think, what familiar pattern do you think you're going to fall into? You're going to fall into chasing. You're going to fall into trying to convince. You're going to fall into overperforming. All right. How many of you are hearing me? If you hear me, type I hear you in the chat. Very important. You want to start getting clear on your vision so that you can choose relationships, create relationships that match the woman that you are. Because when you have a love vision, this is so powerful. You stop negotiating with poor behavior and misalignment. You just stop negotiating with it. Going back to my client, if what your vision doesn't include dealing with, and look, my mother was an addict. My mother was an alcoholic, and she had to get treatment. She had to go and do her own internal work. Didn't make her a bad person. But if you don't want to be in a relationship where from the start you're already dealing with this kind of dynamic, which takes up a lot of space and almost no space for you, because even when they're in recovery, and this is why people who are in recovery are told don't get into a new relationship for a year, because all of their focus has to be on their sobriety. And they don't know how to be in a relationship without this thing, whatever they're addicted to is. So you want to stop negotiating with misalignment, with poor behavior. You want to stop ignoring what's right in front of you, thinking you're going to change somebody. You're going to stop managing what gets to be mutual, something mutual, not something you have to manage. And stop calling inconsistent behavior chemistry, because it's just inconsistent behavior. And what starts happening is you start attracting and you start choosing love that aligns with and moves and grows with you. You get that? It moves and grows with you. So if this conversation is resonating with you, then this is the perfect moment to tell you that if you are ready for 2026 to bring a different level of extraordinary love into your life, it starts with a crystal clear vision for you. And that's why we created Love Vision 2026, for the woman who is done drifting, who's done second guessing where love is going, second guessing herself in relationships. For the woman who's done carrying everything by herself and done trying to make it work in a lopsided relationship that has no shared direction. So if that sounds like you, this is your invitation. It's an invitation to create and step into the kind of partnership that actually matches the woman that you are. So if that sounds like you, I want you to go to reallovevision.com right now. That's reallovevision.com. Just go ahead and drop that in the chat. And if you're feeling that pull, but you're also feeling that you're hearing a little voice that says, I don't know, I want you to know we're here with you. If you really want to experience clear vision that you can create into reality, not a fantasy, but into reality, type vision in the comments because we're right here with you. And I promise that at Love Vision 2026, you're going to get so clear, not only about the vision, but about you. There's going to be a new sense of clarity, a new sense of connection. You're going to really see yourself for who you are. And you're going to create what love is going to be like for you. And this is for women who are single and for women who are in relationships. Both can come. We're so excited. It's happening this weekend, Friday, January 30th through Sunday, February 1st. Tonight, you have your first call in 15 minutes. So you want to register and get into action. Because in 15 minutes, we're having the Prep for Love call. And it is a call that's going to get you emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally, all the ways aligned and ready. We're going to give you information about the event for sure, but you're going to get energetically, spiritually, physically, mentally ready for this weekend. All right, so go ahead and click on or type in reallovevision.com. And I cannot wait to see you there because love does not have to be forced or managed. It really is meant to be built with intention and with clarity and with mutual direction, with both people creating it and then heading in the same direction. And it begins with your love vision. That becomes your internal magnet and compass. So if you're ready for that kind of love, we're right here with you. We've got you. We get to spend the whole weekend together, and we'll see you at Love Vision 2026. And until our hearts meet again, always remember that you are loved. Goodbye for now.